wonder, when you were growing up in Center, in your home with your parents, how exposed were you to the world or even to the idea of China and beyond?
I actually grew up in a town about 9 miles north of there that had 700 people in it. The outside world in those days, I grew up in the 40s and 50s, really didn't exist for people in small East Texas towns. I mean, most of the people there were farmers, and we were pretty much occupied from sunup to sundown with farming chores. My introduction to the outside world came through a sister of my stepfather who had about 100 copies over the years of National Geographic magazine and a complete set of Encyclopedia Britannica and the Encyclopedia Americana, which she allowed me to read. I got a look at the world outside East Texas and was, I think, forever infected with a desire to see that world. And China was part of it. I remember looking at a picture of the Great Wall. I was determined one day to see the Great Wall, to actually walk on the Great Wall. Finally, in 1983, I got my dream.
And 1983, let's remind everyone, was a time when there were very few people from outside of China in China.
You know, there were two things. One, my knowledge of China was a bit dated. I mean, my knowledge of China was reading the National Geographic magazines from the 50s and 40s, which you have to admit that, you know, they had the picture that Westerners had of China at the time, which was not totally accurate. On the other hand, though, the Chinese that I encountered, while I would say there was a friendly curiosity, because they hadn't met that many Americans, and they certainly hadn't met that many Americans of color. Although my Chinese is extremely rudimentary, I spoke a few words of Cantonese, and I managed to learn enough Mandarin to be able to do visa interviews. That was also a bit of a shock to a lot of the Chinese people, to see this foreign face conversing with them in their language. Polite things like, you know, ni hao ma, you know, 我认识你很高兴, 谢谢, thank you, please, can get you a long way. And when you're not expected to know the language, but you know how to say thank you, when to say thank you, and some of the, and a lot of the gestures. I mean, a slight bow of the head when you're talking to someone.
You wrote a book about your grandmother and the life lessons she gave to you. I was just wondering, what do you think your grandmother would make of the world as it is today?
My grandmother was named Sally Young. She was born in Texas in the late 1800s. She basically taught herself to read by reading the Bible and reading an almanac. She basically was born not long after slavery had been ended, where people of color were consigned to ghettos. I mean, we call them quarters. I can almost hear her saying, you know, the problem we have these days is we have too many educated fools who have access to microphones. And we'd be a lot better if most of them would learn to close their mouths and open their ears and minds. You know, her view was, don't tell me what you're gonna do and don't make promises. Go do it. Do it in a way that benefits everyone around you.
I am James Chau. You're watching The China Current. Follow us on social media @The China Current.